So my topic is affective fulfillment in the life of celibacy, and I decided to give a sort of subtitle or second title to my talk, but I will come to this at the end of my introduction that is very short, so don't worry. In honor, actually, of the logo of this event, which is, as you probably know, a painting of Beato Angelico, the Noli Me Tangere, Mary Magdalene at the tomb. Okay, so is celibate life, as the Church understands it and proposes it, to be understood as a call to renounce the joy of human love for pursuing other, perhaps greater forms of human fulfillment, let's say contemplative union with God for those who are more contemplative, or dedication of oneself to serve the poor, other people, for those who are more active. In other words, does the call to give oneself entirely to God, flesh and soul, entail the renunciation to the most human and intense, to quote Gregory of Nyssa, of all natural desires, namely human love, understood as man's and woman's natural desire to beget in the beautiful other, sexually different other, to paraphrase Plato. Addressing this question is today more than ever anything but unimportant. And this not only, and not even primarily, I would say, as I think the previous papers have helped us to make clear, for just moral reasons, although obviously they are also important. But more importantly, because this question is inseparable from another more basic, and I would say foundational, profound one. Does following Jesus Christ unreservedly imply the renunciation or even castration of one's God-given humanity? Or rather its full flourishing, its fulfillment, the display of its full potential? This is the problem I would like to face directly. It's obviously a very challenging one and not easy one, so forgive me if I won't be able to address it properly. I will do my best. Hence the title, the subtitle of my talk, which sort of merges or tries to bring together two among my favorite authors. One is St. John, the Gospel of John, and the other is Plato. And then I will try to make clear through the development of my argument how they kind of illuminate each other. Don't hold me ascending the ladder of love. So Symposium and the Gospel of John. And in order to try to do this, I will rely heavily on the thoughts of an Italian priest on this topic, whom I owe basically everything I know about this topic. In fact, if I am a happy celibate priest, it's first and foremost because of my encounter with this Italian priest, who is now dead, is Father Luigi Giussani, so forgive me if I will quote him often during this talk. And so let's start, first point, the claim. The fundamental claim is this: virginity is a form of possession. First, according to Father Giussani, who uses this evidently provoking expression, virginity rightly understood, that is understood according to Christ's revelation of its meaning, is not first and foremost a form of renunciation. On the contrary, as paradoxical as it can sound, virginity is the truest form of possession. Virginity, in the thought of Father Giussani, is a way of relating to reality that allows for a fuller possession. A possession, that is, which is an anticipation of the modality in which we will enjoy the relationship with things and especially with people in heaven, in the kingdom of heaven, as Lumen Gentium says. I say especially with people for obvious reason, because virginity most evidently and also profoundly affects our relationship with people. In the most basic sense, of course, to be virgin means just to renounce, to get married, and thus sacrificing the most natural and intense desire we bear within ourselves, which is the erotic impulse. However, this is the first important point I want to make. Virginity, in Father Giussani's language, is a form of relation to reality that encompasses everything. Actually, this is always the case. Our sexuality is not just about one thing. It affects our relationship with everything. So, not only the relationship with people of the other sex. Now, in saying that virginity is a form, and even the fullest form of possession, Father Giussani is well aware of being provocative. Don't we should associate life of virginity precisely with the opposite of possession, namely detachment and purification from one's desire to cling to things and people? The answer is obviously yes. In fact, Father Giussani's full definition of virginity is more paradoxical, obviously, than just possession. It's possession in detachment. Possession in detachment. By using the word possession, Father Giussani is not downplaying the importance of ascetical detachment in the spiritual life of the Virgin. As I will try to show, is the opposite. He is rather highlighting something more important, which is that the end of this detachment, of this sacrifice, when it is truly embraced in and for Christ, is not the annihilation of the impetus of love, but rather a different and in a way fuller form of union with the object of one's love. What is love? As Thomas Aquinas teaches, love is, following Dionysius the Areopagite, by the way, is vis unitiva, is impetus towards union. To love means to desire to become one with the beloved. Now, the challenge of Father Giussani, which as a lover of literature, when I was in college, I always found even linguistically fascinating, lies in the claim that virginity, which seems to be the opposite of possession, which externally seems to be renunciation to the end of love, which is union, is in fact the fullest way of becoming one with the beloved, of becoming one with everything, from the most beloved person to the flower, to the star, to the eagle flying in the sky. And how does this make sense? So, first step. This makes sense first of all because the noblest form of possession, in the case of the human being, is achieved when we know the truth of something. I can kiss and embrace, for example, passionately this glass, but if I don't understand that it's a glass, I know I'm stating the obvious, but as Leibniz said, the obvious is the way to the non-obvious. So, if I don't understand it is a glass, I don't possess it with the same fullness of someone who rather quietly pours water or coffee, as in this case, in it and drinks. To possess something humanly, the microphone serves another purpose. So then, okay, to possess something humanly means, first of all, understanding what that thing is, and then relating to it with full respect of its truth, of what it is. This helps us to understand why the definition I gave of virginity seems not to have at first anything to do with sex or chastity, but in fact it does. Virginity, we said, is living things relating to things according to their truth. I said it seems not to have, because such a definition does have a lot to do with chastity. As a matter of fact, to use the same author's favorite example, in order to appreciate a painting, in order to be able to understand what it is about, I need to stay at a certain distance. I need a certain detachment, a certain chastity, as it were. I need to take a step back in order to give the painting the space and the time it needs in order to tell me everything it has to say and show. It is interesting that in Russian, one of my favorite languages, the word for chastity or temperance is tselomudrie, which means integral wisdom, wisdom of the whole. And also, Greek, sophrosyne, temperance, it has inside the meaning of wisdom, of knowledge. And you know that the goddess of wisdom, Athena, is virgin and is born out of the mind of Zeus. So, without a certain distance, a certain detachment, there is no full penetration into the depth of things, into their heart. The example of the painting is crucial, though, also for a second reason. The goal of a painting is never just to say something, some idea, for example, but rather to say it in a beautiful way, through a beautiful form. Now, what does beauty add to truth? And here we come to Plato. Well, this is a hard question. I stick with the most basic response we can give to this question, that again, Thomas Aquinas here is helpful. He defines beauty as quod visum placet, that is what gives you joy, delight, when you see it. What beauty adds to the vision of truth is the element of delight, of rejoicing, that the vision of the beautiful entails. Now, although we usually do not notice it, this means, in fact, something very similar to what Father Giussani says about virginity. Possession in detachment. The joy I receive from the beautiful is a joy I allow the beautiful to give me precisely by letting it be in front of me, by affirming its otherness, its distance from me. In the contemplation of beauty, possession and gratuity, enjoyment and detachment come to mysteriously coincide. The beautiful becomes mine, it gives me joy, only through my act of letting it be there in front of me as other than me. And this is why the kind of response that the beautiful spontaneously elicits, at least in its first appearance, then there is this movement, no? Is a sort of mysterious coincidence of distancing awe and magnetic attraction. I cannot but look, but in order to look, I have to stay at distance. This tense unity of the two. Somehow, it is as if our heart instinctively perceived that the only way to enjoy what we are given to see is by letting it be, by generously loving it, affirming it. Now, I suggest that this is not the last reason why another favorite author of mine, Dostoevsky, was right when he said that beauty will save the world. He was right because beauty is the only thing that has the power to let us foretaste, as it were, at an already natural level, something like heaven. What is heaven? What we can say about heaven is that to be in heaven means to become like God. That is, to become able to see and love everything in the way God does. And how does God love everything? How does God love me and you, the flower, the worm, the eagle, the deer, the tree? God's love is gratuity. is pure rejoicing in the other's existence. Is this let him be? Why does God create me? Because he rejoices. Why does God create at all? Because he rejoices in having someone else to gaze upon. That's Genesis 1. And God saw that it was tov, good. But tov in Hebrew means also beautiful. That is good to see. Good to see. Tov means not only good but beautiful. As if God himself were in wonder in front of his creature. As if he rejoiced that there was no longer only him, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but also the deer, but also the eagle, but also the tree. So we start to understand beauty, at least in some moments, allows me to share, as it were, in the same gratuity, in the same love of God for everything. And it does because it reveals the inner value of things, the inner dignity of things. It's the splendor, no, that it radiates. I love the flower not because it's mine, but because it's beautiful, and therefore it deserves to be. I love you not because you are mine, but because you are beautiful. You are glorious. And it makes me happy that you exist. We see then again the paradox. Beauty gives me life, makes me alive. In the very moment in which she makes me forget about my life, my self-enhancement or whatever. Even more, beauty has the power to make me desire to affirm her without any return. She does also, not only this, she does also make me feel happy about that. She makes me feel that precisely the power to love her so gratuitously is the return, is the gift I receive through her. So you see the paradox. How does this make sense? It makes sense because this kind of love, this kind of rejoicing in the other's being, is indeed a token, a forestate of the highest form of possession possible, which is the divine one. Because it's God's way of seeing and loving. We can draw from here an important corollary. On the one hand, it's true that beauty, as they say, is useless. It doesn't give me anything. On the other, however, it's not unfruitful. Useful, fruitful, or different. On the contrary, beauty bears in me the greatest possible fruit because it transforms me into a generous lover. That is, into an image of God. Father Giussani's definition of virginity starts in this way to look less odd than perhaps it did at first. According to Lumen Gentium, isn't the life of virginity supposed to be precisely this, in anticipation of heaven? The answer is obviously yes, and yet we are always tempted to take this definition in just a negative, or even worse, juridical sense. Well, the virgin is the one who embraces Jesus' state of life, but we reduce what we mean by state of life. There is not a way of being, but just the fact of not getting married. According to the notion of virginity we rapidly sketched, but then we will develop it, virginity is not first and foremost a state of life in this negative sense, although it is also that, but rather, in a positive sense, a way of seeing and loving, which is nothing but the full flourishing, the supernatural deepening, I would say, of that kind of experience that we all, virgin and not virgin, are given to forstate when we are struck by a genuine encounter with beauty. To put it more clearly, the virgin is the one who is called by God to share in the way a man who was God made man, Jesus of Nazareth, gazed at the women he met, at the stars, at the face of his disciples, each one of them. Every single creature he was given to look at through his divine and yet fully human eyes. So I come to my second point. I have 4 points. So, why? Entering the eyes of Christ. What is virginity? Well, I will have to shorten this. It would be longer, but I have to compact it. I teach Christology, so I could talk for long about this, but although. Well. How did Christ see and love people, the world? Well, very synthetically, we could say, I guess, I forget about the scripture's quotes, but Christ saw everything, the flower as the bird, the Samaritan woman, as well as each one of his disciples, as a gift of the Father. As arriving to him, as it were, out of the bottomless mystery of the Father. Better, Jesus saw his disciple as a gift of the Father entrusted to his care, as a gift to be taken care of, to give his life for. In synthesis, this is what virginity is about. Virginity, we may say, is the echo in me, as it was the echo in Jesus' heart, the reflection in my eyes, as it was the reflection in Jesus' eyes, of the vision of the gratuitous love that makes you be, and thus a radiant witness to it in me. What in the natural rejoicing in beauty was foreshadowed finds here its greatest fulfillment. The Virgin is the one who, in looking at the flesh of a human face, is given to pierce through it and perceive the boundless mystery that is contained within that face, which is the person. Or to use John Paul II expression, someone chosen by eternal love. Beautiful, someone chosen by eternal love. And put in front of me so that I could love her, serve her, help her to be more and more what she is made to be. We take in this way a new step in the ascent of the letter of love, to paraphrase Plato. That gratuitous affection that is born in us in front of a beautiful creature becomes in Christ gratuitous readiness to lay down my life for the salvation of every man and woman, because on every face Christ sees the luminous glory of the eternal love from which that face is made, as if glimmering on it. To conclude the second point, then, virginity is then more about entering into a new way of seeing and loving the world, all of it, than about renouncing to have sex, although it is obviously also that. I'll come to this in the second part of the talk. Sex becomes a problem only because one has never taken care of educating and making work what the fathers of the church used to call spiritual senses, which are real senses. The sensors of the glory, as it were. These new eyes, ears, taste, we all received the day of our baptism. It's no accident that our contemporary culture is both pansexual and so poor of contemplation. The taste for virginity grows together with the experience of silence and contemplation, because prayer means, in a Catholic sense, precisely this: a stepping back, which is not a movement away from the flesh of faces and things, from creation, but the condition for penetrating into its depth and thus taste it more. So I come to my third point. I have 4 points. A fruitful sacrifice. A fruitful sacrifice. This is a little bit the longest one. We are at this point ready to address directly the problem we started from. An easy objection to everything I've been saying is that the broad understanding of virginity I proposed risks to downplay, if not even distort, the original meaning of the word virginity, which does, in fact, have undeniably to do with a specific kind of relation, namely the relationship between man and woman. Now, the problem is that we come to this specific relationship. Things become, as you intuitively understand, more complicated for different reasons. The first of which is because the natural, spontaneous response Adam is supposed to have in front of that specific and supreme kind of created beauty, which is called woman, is not just one of contemplative wonder and reverent awe, although it is first of all this, as Genesis 2 bears witness to, but also one of conjugal love. There is no time here to delve into the delicate theological problem that was raised in one of my classes recently, of what the conjugal union would look like if the fall hadn't taken place. It's a notoriously complicated matter. I limit myself to recall the basics, which are the important thing here. First, we obviously all have some experience of the dramatic disorder that the fall has brought about. That very beauty which more than anything in the world should draw out of us what is best, can now equally be the trigger of what is worst. Base sensuality, violence, will to power. It's true, after the fall, human beauty has become an ambivalent enigma. As my friend Dostoevsky would put it, I invite everybody to read carefully the section of the Brothers Karamazov where there is this wonderful description of the tragic paradox of this fact that the very same beauty can save and lose. I lost myself. Where are I? Okay. Nevertheless, the natural call to love that man and woman perceive in the encounter with each other, a call more powerful than any other in nature, still remains valid and good, as it was in the beginning, all the more after the redemption brought about by Jesus Christ. It remains therefore open the question, in which sense, if there is any, the life of virginity can be understood not just as a renunciation to the natural desire for human love, but rather as the, allow me this expression that I usually use in my typology classes, hyperbolic fulfillment, even of that specific dimension of our human structure. The easiest answer to this question may sound, the Virgin finds in Christ himself the beloved. Obviously, there is a sense in which this is absolutely true, as also Father Griffin was pointing out before. Today, as always, that Christ is the spouse of every virgin soul in a very special sense, of every soul, but of the Virgin in a very special sense. From Origen to St. Bernard, from Gregory of Nyssa to John of the Cross, all the greatest contemplative souls have found in the book of Divine Eros, the Song of Songs, the most natural companion for nurturing their interior life, and rightly so. However, today, more than in the past, we are perhaps able to appreciate how ambiguous such an idea can be, if not carefully qualified. In fact, we say, the spouse of the soul, but we are not only soul. We don't exist just as souls. What about the virgin male man? If there is at least one good thing that the sexual revolution in some way has taught us, is that we should always be at the very least suspicious of any Christian spirituality that takes the ineradicably sexual character of our humanity to be simply relevant in our spiritual life, in our relationship with Christ and with his people. If embracing the life of perfection, as we called it in the past, implied the repression or annihilation of such a central dimension of our humanity, then one could and even should feel allowed to ask, what do we mean by perfection? If by perfection, as the word says, mean the fulfillment of the deepest desires of the human heart, well, then certainly the natural desire that we associate with the sexual difference, namely to beget in the beautiful other, can just go frustrated in a life that is meant to be perfect. How then can we address this certainly not easy question? Being aware that we are dealing with a delicate matter and with a mysterious, supernatural kind of experience, which can be easily misunderstood, I want to dare to suggest an answer. My suggestion in brief is the following. Virginity, understood in strict sense, stricto sensu, as the sacrifice of the natural impetus to cling to and beget in the beloved other, is not just a renunciation to the fulfillment of such a natural desire, but rather, in a kind of paradoxical way, a more sublime form of fulfillment of it. Let me explain. First of all, there is no doubt that in embracing celibate life, one renounces to be married. And that precisely this renunciation is the means of the Virgin's transformation of his or her flesh into a sacrifice of love to God for the life of the world. However, the renunciation is not per se the sacrifice. What makes of my renunciation to marriage a sacrifice is not the renunciation, is my love for Christ. A love by grace so great that it makes me, as Father Griffin so importantly and beautifully said, that it makes me want to give away for him even the joy of marriage, which presupposes I see it as a joy. It wouldn't be a sacrifice otherwise. In other words, the notion of sacrifice by itself presupposes and requires the appreciation of the goodness and value of the victim that is being sacrificed, that is being given away for God's sake. Sacrificing a spoiled victim, as the prophet Malachi so impressively puts it already in the Old Testament, has no value in the eyes of God. And this is my first crucial point. Virginity, that is the sacrifice of my flesh to God, presupposes my appreciation of the beauty and goodness of my flesh. More than that, of my flesh as a sexual body. Or to say the same thing from the opposite side, it presupposes, to put it even better, my vulnerability to the attractive beauty of the woman, for me because I'm a man, and vice versa, obviously, to remain within the analogy of beauty. We see then the paradox again. What makes my vow of virginity to be a sacrifice and therefore a fruitful offering is not my indifference to the beauty of the woman, but rather the opposite. The more I see the woman as natural, attractive, precisely as woman, the more I will be able to feel the gift of my flesh to God precisely as sacrifice. I'm obviously not saying that it's good for a celibate priest to fall in love all the time with women. As I'm not saying that the life of virginity doesn't require a serious ascetical path of purification from the passions of the flesh, as the church fathers would put it. And as, by the way, Plato already knew. Of course it does. What I'm saying is rather that to experience what Father Giussani would call preference, there is a strong affection for a particular person of the other sex. And as the witness of John Paul II is a wonderful example of this, not only isn't wrong, but in a sense is an essential dimension of the flourishing of the life of virginity itself. And this, I would say, for at least two reasons, inextricably bound to each other. The first is implicit in what I just said. As a matter of fact, precisely the moments in which I'm given to feel more intensely that virginity is costly, that is really a sacrifice, are exactly the moments in which I can perceive more clearly the greatness of my very gift to God. As if the same fire that makes my heart burn allowed me also and at the same time to smell the sweet fragrance, so to say, of the holocaust of my flesh. The squandering of Mary's nard at Jesus' feet wouldn't pour forth any good fragrance if it did not look like a foolish waste. We see here at work in a new way the paradoxical power of beauty. Precisely by asking me to let her be, beauty lifts me up. She makes me ascend on high. But there is more. What does exactly mean that the Virgin's gift of his flesh to God is a sacrifice? It is a sacrifice only insofar as it is a response to and a participation in Christ's total gift of his flesh on the cross to the Father for the life of the world. And this means the Virgin does not offer his flesh up to God simply, but rather to God for the world, for the life of the world, for the salvation of the world. But the word is not an abstraction. It's never an abstraction in our life. The word is made of concrete people. The word for me has the face of the people whom I am given to love. No one has greater love than this, laying down one's life for one's friends. We come then to complete the point made above. In offering to God the pain I can feel when I have to step back from your beautiful face, I'm indeed transforming my suffering flesh into the efficacious sign, to use a strong word, and I mean it, of my love not only for God, but also for you. In the same way in which the blood pouring out of Jesus' pierced side is not only the ultimate expression of Christ's love for the Father, but also of his love for his friends. And we can go even farther, as the blood pouring out of Jesus' wounded heart becomes in a mysterious way the means of his ineffable union with those very ones through and for whom he suffers. So it is of the suffering of the Virgin can be given to embrace. The suffering the Virgin can be given to embrace. The blood turns into wine. The fruit of one's enduring yes to God is not a loss, but a deeper possession, a deeper union, a deeper communing, one that is truly an anticipation of heaven, an anticipation experience of the risen body. In which sense? Here we really enter a mysterious zone. Let's first ask, what's the difference between Jesus' flesh before and after his resurrection? What can we say about that, if we can say something? Or to frame it in another way, in which way has Jesus' death of love transformed him, changed him? The answer is, for the risen Christ, time and space are no longer a limit. I will be in you and you in me, he says to his disciples. In a mysterious but real way, precisely the risen Christ has now received the power to be one with all those he loves, even without being physically visible. Analogically, the fruit of the sacrifice is for the Virgin a new form of affection, one which is full of a mysterious, before untasted freedom and gratuity. A rejoicing in the other's being, even if she or he is thousands of miles away, even if she or he does not recognize this love. We come to see better then why I said above that the experience of virginity, positively understood, is really the hyperbolic intensification, as it were, of that same possession in detachment we are all given to live in the contemplation of the beautiful. I say hyperbolic intensification because both the detachment and the enjoyment are in equal measure greater in the Virgin's way of loving than they are in natural beholding. The detachment, because the spontaneous letting be, proper to aesthetic experience, becomes now a costly, painful act of letting go. A letting go that can make you cry and bleed sometimes. A letting go that at times can really look like a death. But the possession, on the other hand, because the fleeting sense of gratuitous love that in the aesthetic experience we are given to taste becomes here a stable rejoicing in the other's being, with such an impossible unity of passion and freedom, which is really the beginning of heaven on earth. And so I come to my conclusion. Last point, ascending into the depth. There is no place in Scripture where all this is more sublimely expressed than in the John 9 narrative of the encounter between Mary Magdalene and Jesus at the tomb, which demonstrates my title, so I come to the beginning. There is obviously no time, nor this is the right place, for an in-depth exegesis of this dense and mysterious text, so beautiful and rich. I want to focus only on the mysterious words of Jesus to Mary, which have rightly inspired the imagination of great artists all the time. Me aptu, noli me tangere, which in the Latin translation sounds do not touch me, but the correct translation of the Greek should rather sound don't hold me, because I haven't ascended yet to the Father. Mysterious words. What does Jesus really mean here? Very synthetically, there is no other way for grasping the meaning of Jesus' words than reading them against the background of the text that secretly lies behind the whole of the John 9 narrative, Song of Songs 3:1-4. So let me read it very quickly. Upon my bed by night I sought him whom my soul loves. I sought him but found him not. I called him, but he gave no answer. I will rise now and go about the city in the streets and in the squares. I will seek him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. The watchmen found me as they went about in the city. Have you seen him whom my soul loves? Scarcely had I passed them when I found him whom my soul loves. I held him, and would not let him go, until I had brought him in my mother's house and into the chamber of her that conceived me. In the clinging of Mary Magdalene to the just found risen Lord, the mysterious vision of the sacred poet has now become reality in a new way. Mary is now the woman in love of the Song of Songs, who after having searched in vain for the body of a beloved she thought to have lost forever, hears all of a sudden his voice calling her very name, Mary. And as the woman in love of the song, Mary can help doing what vehement love can't help doing. I held him and would not let him go. The response of Jesus, however, seems to radically contradict the finale of the song's poem. While the Shulamite says she won't let her beloved go until she brought him in her mother's house, Jesus invites Mary precisely to let him go back to the house of the Father. The contrast is evident. And yet, is Jesus truly responding with a no to Mary's desire of clinging to him? A careful reading of his words reveals that this is not the case. Don't hold me, for I haven't ascended to the Father yet. Don't hold me, actually, it can be read yet. What Jesus is saying is not that Mary is forbidden to touch him simply, but rather that he has to ascend to the Father before she could hold him. In other words, his ascension is, ironically, precisely the condition for the superabundant fulfillment of her desire. There is the condition for entering in a new way of intimacy with her Lord, which is greater than the one she pursued before, because incomparably more interior and free from the limits of time and space. It's time to conclude. Father Giussani has always taught that the Feast of Virginity is the feast of the Ascension of the Lord. I hope to have made at least a bit clear why I think this is the case. The Ascension of the Lord is not a departure from the world. It's not a separation from John, from Simon Peter, from Mary Magdalene. It's rather a path into a deeper mode of union with them, the name of which, as we have tried to say, is virginity.